Yeah. Okay, just to let everybody know, be fully up. This is being recorded now, so anything you say can and will be on YouTube. And so that's the way.
So, and the only people you have on are like Kinsey, right? She's gonna be showing.
It's only got me and Franny's hands. It's got me and
Grandma's a hand model.
Yeah. And so if you got a Bible, please turn to Genesis chapter 2. So we've kind of been hitting highlights of the first few chapters of Genesis. These are stories we are very, very, very familiar with. And we're going to be reading this, and we're going to be familiar with the stories. We know the stories, but I'm going to tell you some stuff about the stories that you never knew before. Probably. Okay. So, Genesis chapter 2.
Judges or Genesis?
Genesis? Did I say Judges?
Yes,
Just now.
Just now I said Judges. Okay. So Genesis chapter 2, verses, we're going to just read over really quickly verses 8 through 17. You know what? That's not right. We are going to read 8 through 17, but we're not reading all of that. So we're going to read... Oh, no, we're reading 8 through 17. That's just what we're doing. Okay, like it or not. Okay, so Genesis 2, 8 through 17. Who wants to read that?
I will read it.
Okay.
The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became 4 riverheads. The name of the first is Pishon. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Pishon.
It is the one which skirts the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Bdellium and the onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is Gihon, and it is the one which goes around the whole land of Cush. The name of the third river is Hiddekel, and it is the one which goes towards the east of Assyria. The fourth river is the Euphrates. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. Okay,
very familiar story. Everybody knows the story. I'm not gonna reiterate what we just read because we're pretty familiar with it, except for the rivers part. It's like hardly anybody knows about the river. So what it's saying is that basically Eden was put on a hill and all the rivers came, that there was a spring that came from the hill, and all the rivers came from the hill. Now, the funny thing is that if you look at the rivers on the map, then they are in very different parts of the world. So Cush, which was mentioned, is Ethiopia. So that's Africa. And then the Tigris Euphrates, that you mentioned another name, but it's actually the same as the Tigris. So it mentions the Tigris.
The Hiddle.
Yeah, the Hiddle. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, mine says Tigris.
Yeah. And so that's the Tigris. And so both of those
Apparently
are
also known as that other one, which I didn't know.
Yeah,
Which other one?
Whatever she said, apparently it's also known as that.
Tigris, aka Hiddekel.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't know that it had another name. I'd always, in all the translations I had, it was always Tigris. So okay, something new. Anyway, but that's way over in Iraq. Not Iraq. Yeah, Iraq. Yeah. And they actually go from the Persian Gulf. And then the other one, the Pishon, I just found out just a couple of weeks ago that actually that is a river that flows underneath Jerusalem.
Oh, wow.
So that's actually a river straight in the middle of Israel. Okay. So once again, we're talking geographically, we're talking about very different places. And they're saying, okay, but at this time the geography was such that all the rivers came from the same place. Two things that we just want to say here: that Eden, number one, the geography is very different according to this than at any time that we know. And the other thing is that Eden is really huge. It's not just a little teeny garden that we would have in somebody's backyard. It is enormous.
Yeah.
Possibly hundreds of thousands of miles long. Not hundreds, thousands of miles long. Anyway, but just really big. It's a very big place. Okay, and what it is it says that God made a garden. Now, it says garden or paradise, the word that's often used, and that means it is a tended garden. It is a specific garden, and the way that they thought about gardens at this time is basically gardens were walled. It was walled off so that way it was protected from anybody else coming in, and every single aspect of the garden was set up specifically in order to provide pleasure, to provide beauty, to provide a safe space for the plants and for anybody who happens to be staying there. Now, in ancient Babylon, they would have gardens like this all the time, and in fact, one of the gardens, known as the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And so this is the kind of garden that they're talking about. One of these basically artistic features that also provides all your needs. And so it's got everything you need right there. And not only was it a plant garden, but it's also a zoological garden. It's got a lot of animals in it. And in fact, at the time it had all the animals in it. And so it just had all these animals. Actually, we don't know if it had all the animals, but it had a lot of animals. And they're wandering around. So this is some sort of lion country safari, or I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
so it's all bordered, and it's got a bunch of animals and lots of plants, and every single plant and tree is specifically geared. And so it's got the tree of life in it, and if you eat the tree of life, then you live forever. It's also got the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the one thing that God told them not to do, we all know, don't eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat the fruit of it, and everything will be okay. And we're thinking, oh my goodness, God tripped him up right at the beginning. Look, it's thousands of miles wide, and he told you to not eat one tree. Thousands of miles wide. He told you not to eat one tree. It shouldn't be too difficult to avoid. And Adam, and just like we said last week, 2 weeks ago, Adam is not a person's name. Adam is the Hebrew word for human. So Adam's name was not Adam. Adam is the word human in Hebrew. And so it's just, so every time you see Adam, you just say the human. You got the human, and you've got the human and the woman. That's all you got here. So, so which human and the woman, I know, isn't that horrible? Okay, we talked about the men and women thing a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to go over that again. Anyway, and so, but that's the way that the story goes. So it's just the human. Although a lot of times, instead of Adam, sometimes it says the man. And so when it says the man, man in both Hebrew and Greek can mean either man or husband. Woman in both Hebrew and Greek can either be woman or wife, depending on the context. Okay, so once again, got this big thing. We got a tree, not supposed to eat. We all know how this goes. Okay, so if someone could please read another very familiar passage, Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. We'll just keep going through this.
Okay, I'll read it. Genesis 3, 1 through 7. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, But God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves.
Okay. All right. Once again, very familiar passage. We know about this. We have the serpent. Now, what I want to say here is that when I'm explaining this passage, there are different ways of looking at this passage. And in fact, actually, if you get a book, and it's just called Genesis, and it's edited by Bill Moyers. Basically, what Bill Moyers did as a journalist is went out and he talked to tons of people and said, okay, let's sit down, read this book together, and you tell me what you think it says.
Oh, cool.
And that's the whole book. The whole book is just different people giving their points of view. Each point of view is completely viable, a completely good point of view on it. Why? Because especially the first 11 chapters of Genesis, these are the stories of all humanity. It isn't just one people's stories. These are the stories of all humanity, and that means all humanity has the right to interpret this and figure out what it means. Now, from my perspective, I am more interested in seeing what Jesus had to say about it, because I want to understand his point of view. So when I'm talking about this and bringing up passages, I'm really interested in hearing Jesus' point of view. I'm also interested in hearing everybody else's point of view and all that. And so for right now, let's pretend that I'm Bill Moyers. We're going to ask a couple questions. So let me just ask a question of all of you. So here we have what is, according to many, what is the first sin? Okay. What is sin? What makes something sinful? And what is the basic principle of, okay, well, this is sin and this is not sin? How do we know what is sinful and what isn't sin? So what do you think? And once again, there's no right or wrong answer here. Just I'm looking for ideas. What do you think?
So you want us to answer the question, what is sin?
What is sin? Yep.
Well, I've been taught there's kind of like levels of sin, which is very Catholic also, but like there's like sin that's not intentional. You didn't mean to hurt someone or do something, and so that has very low
Eternal
culpability
consequences.
or eternal consequences. But if you figure it out, you should try to make it right. But and then there's like sin where you know it's wrong, but you decide to do it anyway. And then there's the level where someone is so has just gone over a line where they just sin is like just their lifestyle, and they don't have any conscience about it anymore.
Okay, and that explains different kinds of sin. But once
Right.
again, how is it that you're going to put something in that category?
So
These things are sin.
sin.
And
I see what you're saying.
these actions over here are not. How do you know the difference?
I'd
Right.
say knowing the consequences to the other end, and so you're gonna hurt somebody, you know that's gonna damage them or kill them.
Okay.
Then you still willingly do that.
Like that makes it sin.
Right.
That's sin. Knowing
So
there's a
hurting
consequence,
somebody
hurting somebody else, you're taking on that. I know I'm gonna hurt this person. I'm going to do it. You just sinned.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
And-
without if for some reason you didn't know that I chopped this tree down and it fell and hit somebody and it killed them, that's not exactly sin. But if you say I'm going to chop this tree down and it's going to fall on that guy's house and kill him,
Mhm.
that would be sin.
Okay. So
Intention.
So intention is one of the aspects.
Yeah.
Then, so you say it's got to be intentional for it to be simple. Let me ask you though, what if you've chopped down 100 trees and you knew that there was a 50-50 chance that that tree might fall in that house or it might not fall in that house? So you could say, oh well, I didn't know it was going to fall in that house, but still, you
Or it
kind of,
created an avalanche and killed the whole town.
yeah. Anyway, I'm just saying, intention is sometimes
True,
tricky to
yeah.
figure out because
Yeah.
it actually, you know,
You can weasel.
you can.
Yeah,
lose-
you can.
I
split
think,
it.
Yeah.
yeah, sin is interesting because, I mean, you know, I was raised Catholic and I was taught it was a sin to miss Mass on Sunday. And, you know, some sins were mortal sins. Like I think even missing Mass on Sunday was a mortal sin back in the 50s and 60s, which a mortal sin means you go to hell if you don't have that off your conscience. You haven't gone to confession.
Well, we'd all be in trouble.
Yeah, I'm sure would be. But there are so many things that people consider sins that really I don't think are sins.
Okay, I think that's certainly true.
Yeah.
Well, I think about like, okay, now we know we're naked and we have to cover up.
Mhm.
And, like maybe everything we do now is sinful. Maybe that's just the world we're living in now. And you know, you see like they find little pockets of humanity and they're like completely nude, you
Uh-huh.
know, and they don't feel nude.
Uh-huh.
They just feel like they're
Human.
human. Yeah. And like, or like, you know, like a giraffe doesn't feel naked, you know, and because it's just has its skin. Anyway, yeah, it's fur. Anyway, so I want to think about that. I can't figure it out, but I feel like there's something to that, like this knowledge, you know. So was Eve sinning? She was disobeying God. So
Mhm.
maybe disobeying God is sin.
Mhm.
But did she really understand? Because she didn't have the knowledge yet, you know. So I
Right,
don't know.
and in fact, actually, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, in that Eve was given bad information.
Right.
Because she said, if I can't eat it and I can't touch it. Well, God didn't say you can't touch it. It was her husband who told her that she couldn't touch it because he wanted to make sure that she didn't do it. And Satan, or the serpent, said, used that and said, "Oh, well, you see, you got told this, and that's just totally wrong information.
Mm.
You know, God's just lying to you." But it wasn't God that was lying to you. It was the husband who was trying to make sure that she didn't touch it, you know, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so that's kind of tricky too. So was it a sin to touch it?
Did she die when she ate it?
That's another good question. Did she die when she ate it? Yeah.
Are we all dead? You know, I mean,
Well, that's
I feel
kind of-
pretty
yeah.
naked when I have my clothes off.
Actually, it's actually a zombie. We're actually zombies. That's what it is. According to the Bible, we're all zombies. But I still haven't. I mean, I think we're getting. We've gotten the idea that there's a bunch of things maybe that aren't sin, or possibly everything is a sin.
Yeah.
Us sitting here
Yeah,
talking about the
yeah,
Bible is a sin.
yeah.
You know, or but there's some things that could be. I'm still trying to figure out what is a sin and what isn't a sin. I mean, I think that maybe, you know, okay, so there was a command of God that was disobeyed. Is that the definition of sin? Something that goes against the command of God?
I think if you're trying to define with clear lines what is a sin, you're in the company of all religion makers throughout time. And I wouldn't endeavor to do it.
You start.
Okay, so I asked a question and she says I'm not going to answer it. Okay, anybody else want to take a shot at it? Okay.
I'm kind of with Matt a little bit, and I think that the royal law going against Jesus' command absolutely constitutes sin. I don't know if there are other things to include in that, but I mean, I think pretty much everything I can think of that would be sinful is pretty much covered in love your neighbor as yourself and love the Lord. Yeah, I just think that the idea of actually, it goes beyond not harming other people. It's looking after other people. So it is the sin. You can sin by omission as well as by commission, because you are not helping when you could. You're not actually actively harming them, but you know, you could help
Mhm.
and you didn't. And so,
Okay. Anybody else want to say something about this?
Well, I think what I am struck with in that verse is that her husband's with her, and he could have taken action at any time and stopped.
It strikes me too.
But he took mine out.
Right. Instead, he took some too, and he wanted to. I mean, maybe he just wanted to see what would happen when she ate it.
And then tried to blame it on her.
And then she didn't drop dead, so I don't know. I'll try some too. Maybe God is a liar.
Adeline, did you want to say something about this? Because we had that whole philosophical discussion the other day about what's right and what's wrong.
Not really.
Oh, come on, it was such a good conversation.
I don't really remember.
Okay.
Like temptation, and that's like, you know, is that one of the,
Is temptation the same as sin?
yeah, I mean, I think it is kind of plays into it. I mean,
Yeah.
now you've realized you're naked.
Okay.
So, and you have a man and a female, and it's like, so, I mean, is that sin? Like tempting to lust?
Well,
I
look-
think if you're thinking, could this be a sin, that it would be a sin if you're thinking about. You know what I'm,
doesn't that sound a little bit closer to, well, even if you touch it, then you're going to die?
Manifestation.
Yeah.
Well,
Good. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
sounds
but
actually
it-
to me like what's in Paul about people who believe that it is a sin to eat the meat. For them, it is a sin, even if it's not for someone who doesn't think that.
Okay, but that's if you do it, not if you think about it.
Yeah, if you do, yeah,
Right.
well, I think that's what.
Right,
Paul
if
is
you
Jesus
saying.
said,
act on
even
it,
thinking
yeah.
lustful thoughts
Uh-huh.
is sinning.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I want to go at this and look at something different. Let's talk about the serpent for a second. We'll get back. Okay, so let's talk about the serpent for a second. Okay, so we got the serpent in Genesis, clearly just one of the animals. Okay, it's got legs, and by the way, when they say serpent, they don't necessarily mean a snake. A better idea of it in your mind is a dragon. Okay, dragon is actually just kind of a big snake with legs. It's kind of what a dragon is, and so the serpent is a dragon. It's kind of like a dragon, big snake with legs. Okay, that makes sense because the serpent has got legs, and so.
Also, dragons traditionally speak, whereas snakes don't usually.
Exactly. No, that's true. That's
a
true.
good point. Yeah.
Okay, so, and traditionally in both Christian tradition and most Jewish tradition, the serpent is the same as the devil or Satan. Now, in the Christian tradition, we get that mostly from both Revelation and from Jesus. In Revelation, in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, it says, the great dragon, remember, serpent, dragon, the great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. So who's that talking about? Yeah, that's definitely talking about this guy. Can't be anybody else. Doesn't really fit anybody else. Okay, definitely that. Jesus also said that Satan was a murderer from the beginning. Okay, once again, talking about the beginning. When is the beginning? We're talking about Eden. That's the beginning. A murder. Why? Because the whole purpose of what the serpent is trying to do here is trying to kill Adam and Eve, who's not yet called Eve. She's just called woman. She's not Eve until after they leave Eden. Anyway, and so, but he's trying to kill the two humans who are there. Why is he trying to kill them? What is going on here? Once again, I just want to say, I'm not necessarily interested in finding out exactly what Genesis is saying, because I think that you can interpret Genesis a lot of different ways. And there's no problem with that. I'm just trying to understand what Jesus is trying to get at. So if Jesus is saying that this serpent is someone who is trying to murder, then why is he trying to do that? Now, ancient Jewish tradition says that the reason that that Satan is trying to kill off the humans is because Satan thought that the angels should be ruling the earth. But who did God give the earth to? Gave the earth to these upstart humans who just came on the scene. They just showed up. Who are they? They don't know anything. They're idiots, okay? They're idiots. There's a great book that has, it's supposed to be a story of Adam and Eve, and just Adam is kind of like Homer, just all the time, just not really very bright. And I really think that kind of gets the point across, that Adam doesn't seem like an extraordinarily bright person. Anyway, and so, certainly from angels' point of view, who have lived a long time, who have gone through a lot of stuff, they've got a lot of wisdom, they've got a lot of knowledge, they certainly have a much better idea of ruling the earth than humanity does, and so why shouldn't they be in charge? And so Satan is really upset. Now, the other thing, and I've mentioned this before, but Satan isn't a name, it's a title. And it literally means accuser, and not accuser as somebody who points fingers at other people, but accuser as in a formal, proper job that someone has. Who has a job as an accuser? That's what they do.
The DA.
A district attorney. Satan is a term for a district attorney. Just somebody whose job it is to point fingers. So a Satan, so it's not the Satan, it is a Satan, because there's lots of different Satans. As a district attorney, their job is to accuse people of crimes. That's what they do, is they accuse people of crimes. So here, and so what he's doing here in this context is he's trying to trick the humans into doing a crime so that way he can accuse them before God. And what is God going to have to do according to God's promise?
Kill him.
He's going to have to kill him. This is Satan's strategy. All throughout the Bible, every time you see Satan, he is out there accusing people so that way God would have to kill them. And God is really sneaky because he's always going around forgiving people. And it's kind of a bad scene, for Satan, because he goes through a lot of work to try to accuse people again and again, and then God goes around and forgives them. He doesn't like that. Anyway, and so here he is in this context. He's trying to trick them into doing the one crime that they are supposed to do. There's only one crime that the humans could do. Only one thing that they were given, only one stipulation that they were given in the entire garden. They could do whatever the heck they wanted, except for one thing, which is to eat of this fruit. That's the only thing that they absolutely are not supposed to do. Anything else is totally open, but they're not supposed to eat of this particular fruit. And like we said a couple weeks ago, fruit doesn't necessarily mean a sweet thing that we eat. It's any kind of produce of a tree. So like, for instance, in the Bible, the wheat grain is the fruit of a wheat stalk. That's just, so it's any kind of produce. So for all we know, it could be a grain of wheat, nuts, seed, anything. We don't know. We don't have any. In fact, probably, I think from now on, instead of calling it apples, let's call it cashews. Cashews, okay? Oh, Adam wants some cashews. Yeah, I definitely want some cashews. All right. So here we've got, so here they are. The woman is tricked because first, like we said a couple of weeks ago, she was lied to by her husband because he didn't trust her, which is actually, if you want to say if there's potentially an original sin, it's the fact that the husband and wife didn't trust each other. The husband didn't trust the wife, so he lied to her and said, oh, we're not supposed to touch it. And then the wife didn't trust the husband by saying that, oh, well, so this is God's thing and we're just not supposed to do this. And the wife is just like, oh, really? Oh, I'm thinking about this now. So if there's an original sin, maybe that was it, except that they weren't told to trust each other either.
Yeah.
So it's not the sin. That's not the sin. That's the problem. The problem was lack of trust. The sin was eating the fruit. Okay, So what actually happens here? What actually is it that we see going on here? So you've got one sin, one problem, eating the fruit. And after they ate the fruit, what did Adam and the woman, what did they see as the problem?
That they were naked.
That they were naked. Did God tell them it was a problem to be naked? He didn't tell them that. Is it a sin to be naked?
I don't think so, but
It's
a lot of people do.
unavoidable
Okay,
sometimes.
let me ask you this. Is it a sin to be naked in front of God, your spouse, and an animal? Because those are the only things that were there. It's not a sin to be naked. If it's a sin to be naked in front of an animal, we're all in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay? Probably all of us at one point or another have been naked in front of a cat. Okay? And it's not a sin to be naked in front of your spouse. That's what I hear. It's not a sin to be naked in front of God, although otherwise none of us can take showers again.
Yeah.
Okay? So if there was any time in the world where it was not a sin to be naked, that was the time.
Mhm.
Because all there is animals and God and your spouse. So it wasn't a sin to be naked, but they felt shame about it. Who made it a sin to be naked?
They did.
They did.
Wow, interesting.
The difference between before they ate the fruit, before they ate the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, is before the only thing they knew what was good and evil is what God told them. And afterwards, they were making it up themselves.
Wow, that's interesting too.
The problem with the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the problem that we all have is that we tend to make up things that are bad.
Mhm.
And then we start putting it on other people.
Right.
Our problem with the sin, the real sin of the original sin, is judging other people for doing things that aren't wrong. That's the original sin, is judging other people for doing things that aren't wrong. Because we make things up. What the fruit did is it said the authority of what is good and what is evil is no longer in God's hands, it's in our hands. We make it up on a daily basis.
That is
Sometimes on a minute by minute basis, because some of us are really good at it.
So basically it was culture. We've
Um,
got, it's a shared set of ideas and beliefs of right and wrong and.
There are, what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said is that the original sin is ethics,
Yeah,
which is an aspect of culture.
yeah,
So yeah, he said that ethics is the original sin. It's us just inventing what's right and wrong.
trying
And I
to
would,
put each other in boxes, and
what's that?
trying to put each other in boxes,
Right.
but also maintain some kind of social order and.
Well, but we can agree to maintain a social order without putting the label of sin or evil on it. And so here's the thing that happens a lot of times is that we have a thing, we have an emotion which is called disgust. Okay, and disgust comes very early, but it's interesting that as scientists have analyzed disgust, they found that disgust is not it's not inherent in us, in humans. It's learned.
Oh, yeah.
You know how we know this? Because babies love playing with poop.
Yes, exactly. I was gonna say, you have to teach a child, like.
Yeah, exactly. So when and let's face it, poop is, I mean, on a disgust level, that's pretty basic. Okay, that's pretty basic. Poop is disgusting. Okay, we are all in agreement with that. Poop is disgusting. Like, you have to train a baby that it's disgusting because they don't know yet.
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
you see an ape, they got a big lump of poop in their mouth.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know, dogs are eating poop. I mean,
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You know, it is.
What are we missing out on?
I don't want to know. I just there's some things I don't want to know. Okay, that's one of those things. You know, and probably, I mean, you know, and definitely throwing poop at someone else, which that monkeys do. It would in our society, that's a sin. In fact, you can be arrested for throwing poop at someone else because that is that's a
Biohazard.
biohazard. You are threatening someone's health.
Possibly, possibly very badly, depending
Yeah,
on what's
exactly.
in
What's in
that.
that boot?
So
Yeah.
we've taken and it's really true, but the thing is that somebody had to say, you know what, this is bad enough that we need to make a law about not throwing poop at each other. Someone had to think of that. I don't know who thought of that.
Probably the person who got poop thrown at him.
And got a terrible disease.
Let's
You-
not do
you
that anymore.
You don't have to get a terrible disease because the disease is all in your head. Because you could have the poop on there and our imagination takes over the rest.
And then you get sick because you think.
Thinking about it. Okay, yeah. So, but the thing is that disgust creates all kinds of sins. Now we can logic out, that there really is a sin. There really is a problem with throwing poop at each other. Okay, that's a bad thing. But then every time,
She just
And
came back
you
and
know,
was like,
wait a minute.
She's like, what?
We were talking about the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and now you're talking about eating poop. Wait, what? You see, it's a bad thing to leave. Never leave in the middle. Okay. But the thing is that our disgust creates sin after sin. So poop is one level, and we can logic that out. But Carmen talked about this story one time where she was over by the side of the road, and some person explained to their child about how bad being homeless is, using Carmen right there as an example.
Wow.
Look at
And
that
saying-
lady.
Yes.
Stay in school or you end up like that. And I worked
What
all
she's
my
doing,
life.
and so what that person is doing is saying, see how disgusting. That person is training their child. Look how disgusting this other human being is.
Wow.
You don't want to be like that. And so what happens after that is people say, oh yeah, that is disgusting. And we have a whole group of people that say, well, people who are like this or who do this, they are disgusting people. So since they're disgusting people, we need to find laws to keep them away from good people. And then you end up having laws or policies, and you end up criminalizing whole groups of people, and you create a class of sinners. A class of people who, by their very nature, are sinners. And that's what we had in Portland today. Homeless people are outcasts. They are a caste of people who are rejected by good people in society.
And we're not all the same.
And
You're just
that
like everybody
is the outgrowth of the sin of eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil, taking whole groups of people and saying, this is the thing. And we can make lists, and I have one here just in case. We can make lists of laws or policies and all that are ridiculous because somebody at one point thought, this is bad, we need to make a law about this, or we need to make a policy about this because this is just bad. Look how disgusting this is.
Yeah, because if you're homeless, you all take drugs. That's
And-
just the way they label it.
Right.
Yep.
And so we say, well, okay, that's nice. But what does that have to do with Jesus? Okay, let's go to Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7, starting at verse 1. Okay. So we're going to see what Jesus has to say about this same type of thing.
Yeah.
Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7, verses 1 through 8. So, Diane, you want to cover this one?
Sure. The Pharisees and some of the scribes gathered around him when they had come from Jerusalem and had seen that some of the disciples were eating their bread with impure hands, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they carefully wash their hands, thus observing the traditions of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they cleanse themselves, And there are many other things which they have received in order to observe, such as the washing of cups and pitchers and copper pots. The Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat their bread with impure hands?" And he said to them, "Rightly did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men. Neglecting the commandment of God, you hold to the tradition of men.'"
Okay. Same thing. That Jesus isn't referring specifically to the early chapters of Genesis, but he's talking about exactly the same thing. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this washing of hands. The way that it would work is there'd be a basin available for everyone, and everyone would go through and they would dip their hands. They wouldn't scrub their hands because they didn't have the idea of germs. They weren't trying to get anything off of their hands. They would just dip their hands in. And once your hands were dipped, your hands are pure.
It's like holy water.
I mean, we could think about this. It doesn't take a lot of thought about people like who work with their hands and a bunch of people that everyone is dipping into the same
You're
bowl.
actually
And
community germs.
yeah, you're actually sharing the germs with each other, and now your hands are pure. Yeah, no. So it seems pretty ridiculous. And I wonder, Jesus having a little bit of knowledge that everybody else has, I wonder if he just went and said, "Oh my goodness, there are germs everywhere. I can't stand this. How could they even put their hands in that water?" No, because Jesus did the same thing, but I'll bet you dipped his hands over. Could you get me a clean rag, please?
That's our box.
I need a
You're talking
diaper
about.
wipe.
That's our box that we're in.
Yeah, exactly.
It is.
It
Because
is.
we evolved to deal with germs and
right. Mm-hmm.
bugs and everything. Like we have immune systems that we're actually destroying by killing all the germs.
Right, exactly. And so that's our problem.
That's our
and
thing,
it's
yeah.
our thing. And so a lot of times, why is it that people look at homeless people and say, "Oh, you're disgusting," because they think they see them as dirty, or
Yeah.
they're dirty people. And
Yeah.
what is the most holy thing that we relish and praise more than anything else? Soap.
Yeah.
We love soap. And if it's antibiotic soap, it's even better.
That's
And
the word
Kills
for you.
99.99% of germs.
Exactly.
Every year
exactly.
and
And
a half.
then if the
So then you're all sick.
0.01%.
And then if the soap isn't good enough, we got to use bleach
Right.
because we don't
love
want anything alive.
I love
Nothing.
Exactly.
But the fact is that it. And so if somebody doesn't use bleach or doesn't use soap, they are dirty, and therefore they are impure and they are sinful. Because the idea of being impure is the same thing in the ancient world as being sinful. It's the same thing.
Yeah, of course, in our society, we don't use the word sinful. We say gross.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's
Right.
right.
It's the same basic idea.
Right. Exactly. And so what Jesus is saying is, you guys have totally screwed up what the idea of sin is in the first place. The idea of sin is whether God said something or didn't say something, not whether it is it fits some sort of idea of purity. And he says, your guys' idea of purity is really weird. And guess what? Our idea of purity, it's really weird too. Idea of purity in no matter which culture is really weird.
It is. And
It's
so we can't ever escape this knowledge that we have
Exactly.
because it's a curse that is on us.
That's right.
And it is passed, it is literally passed
Yes.
on and on. But there is a way that we can escape it, which is that we can stop calling it sin and stop judging each other. It seems to me like somebody said that maybe judging is a bad idea. That maybe we could kind of avoid that. Now,
What kind of weird stuff are you reading?
I know. So the thing is that Jesus is making a distinction between the command of God and human traditions, the things that we make up. Okay, and we make up a lot, by the way, tax code, that thing, and all. We make up a lot of stuff, and then we say this is what's good, this is what's bad, and if you do what's bad, somebody can take you to court, and you can lose everything your entire life because you did the bad thing that somebody made up.
Like a lot of this, I have to say.
Okay, and I'm actually just getting to that. How many commands does God give in the Bible?
10.
Close.
Never mind.
No. Okay, so you say 10. How many thinks it's more than that? How many thinks it's less? You think it's more? Okay, how many more?
A lot
A lot more. So in the Old Testament, so the Jews counted that there are 618 commands in the law. Okay. However, what's interesting is that after the 10, so God gave 10, he gave that in his own voice. Right after that, the people said, we don't want to hear God speak to us anymore. Moses, you go to God and you just tell us what he said. In the Old Testament, there are literally 10 commands that come from God. And then Jesus adds 2. There are 12 commands, or you could say that the 2 are summaries. There are 12 commands that come from the voice of God. All the rest of them come from people. God's commands are really simple. They're really pretty basic. And I think that the way Jesus said it is there's basically 2. Love God and love other people. I like the way that Augustine put it. Augustine said, love and do whatever the hell you want. I added it's just tweaking the Latin a little bit. Yeah, SKV is Augustine. So love and do whatever the hell you want. Because if you are caring for the people around you, then it's going to be okay. Now the problem is that we all live in cultures in which love is down it's kind of down the list of things that we should and should not do. I mean, sure, everyone in every culture says, yes, we want to love, we want to have mercy on other people. And Jesus is saying, no, actually, this is the main thing. And here's the thing. Let's assume for a second, and maybe this is an assumption, that when God set up the garden, God set up the garden in such a way so that way he provided everything. He provided food, he provided shelter, he provided a context for them to live, he protected them completely. And then they said, screw you, God, we don't want you anymore. That's what taking on that on purpose, which Adam did and his wife didn't. Taking that on purpose is saying, screw you, God, I don't need you anymore. I don't need you. I don't want your mentorship. I don't want your protection. I can do just fine on my own, which is basically like a toddler saying, bye, Mom, I'm out of here. I'm sure I can take care of myself. Okay, and God said, oh, you want to live on your own? Well, I gave you the responsibility to take charge. And what eating the tree said is, now you're in charge. If that's what you want,
yeah,
you're there and you're in charge. And this is what's going to happen, is you're going to make up all kinds of things that make everybody's lives miserable, including yourself. You are going to make yourself so miserable by putting up so many stupid rules. And this is what's going to happen, is you are going to make your life miserable by making up in your head lots of rules based on your disgust and based on your anger. Instead of if God was providing the mentorship for our ethics, it would all be based around love and mercy. What is it that this person needs, and let's provide it for them? Oh, does that actually hurt them? Well, then why are we putting up a rule? If they had been under God's mentorship, then maybe they would have said, oh wow, we're naked. That's a horrible thing. And that's his wife. Why is that horrible? There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with being. What's the matter with you? There's nothing wrong with being naked. There's no problem with being naked. And then go, oh yeah, oh, you're right, God. There's nothing wrong with that. You're right. That's perfectly okay. But instead, since they said, no, we're in charge, it's our rules. Our rules are what important. God just says, oh, okay, here we go. And he gets them close.
That seems kind of enabling to me.
Does it?
Yeah. He's like, oh yeah, you're right. You're naked. Here you go.
Well, it's just, I would say it's just the system that God set up. God put them in charge. And he said, in this context, I'll take care of you. And all you have to do is, and I will mentor you and everything's going to be okay. But I'm giving you the opportunity, whenever you feel that you're grown up enough, you can go on your own.
The other thing about the clothes thing, though, is he also kicked them out of the garden. And it was no longer,
Climate control.
yeah, no longer paradisical weather.
Mhm.
And so they needed the
Is
clothes.
that a word?
No,
I'm like, wow.
It is now.
it's paradisical, I think. I
Oh,
think
wow.
there is a word, but yeah, anyway, they needed the clothes at that point, and he gave them something better than what they had fashioned for themselves.
Right, that's what I was thinking. He's gonna, you gotta wear clothes, but you need something a little better.
So there's a couple things that I think Jesus is telling about. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, eventually God will bring us back into Eden. It's interesting. If you read the Bible really carefully, it's clear that what God has planned at the end is totally different than at the beginning. At the beginning, it's kind of a country, it's a garden atmosphere. At the end, it's a city.
Mm.
You know, it's not the same. It's really not the same. There's a lot of differences, but the thing is that so once God kicked him out of the garden, and by the way, the whole question of did they die? Did they die when on the day that they ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Yeah.
I think that it just means that now we will die.
Okay.
Not that day, but
Mhm.
eating of the apple.
Instead of
Now we will die of old age or get hit by a car.
So what did happen on the day?
You became mortal.
What they did, they were already
You were
mortal,
already
right?
mortal.
Because he
So
does say, hey, we better get him out of here before they go eat out of that off the tree that now they can live forever.
and that's what happened today. On that day, they were cut off from
Yeah.
the possibility of immortality.
Yeah.
And that's actually the death that he's talking about. Because before, they could have gone and eaten the tree of life at any point.
Yeah, it's interesting they didn't.
I think because they didn't know what it was, because they were pretty ignorant.
Yeah.
And so they didn't know that it was even there. So otherwise they would have said, and even so, they said, you know, it's kind of like us going to the doctor. Yeah, I probably need to see the doctor, but I feel pretty good today. I don't need to go and do that today. I'll do it tomorrow. You know, in fact, I'd probably wait till next month, maybe next year. I'll get around to the whole tree of life thing.
It's way over there.
Maybe it tasted really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
It smells like one
You
of
know.
those fly smell, you know, those
It
things.
tastes like
that
poop.
smell- Yeah.
That was good.
If only we were babies and we would like it. Okay, so the thing is that immortality isn't a possibility, and that happened on the day that they ate the fruit of the knowledge of tree of good and evil, and so that was separated from them. They were no longer allowed in the garden. The garden is a walled garden, and now there's this big angry sword that's keeping them from the garden. Okay, so isn't it interesting though that when the serpent or Satan, when Satan tricked them, and now they ate the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, and now they are just like Satan. Because what's Satan's job? It's accusing people.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, every single person in humanity is a Satan.
Mhm.
And
Right.
now, so instead, before, when they were with God, God was teaching them the path of mercy. He was teaching them the path of love because God is love. And he was saying, I'm going to teach you this path. And Satan says, no, now you're out here and now you're just like me. Now I'm going to teach you, instead of teaching you love, I'm going to teach you wisdom. I'm going to teach you the full idea of right and wrong. And it's not just a very narrow idea of right and wrong. It's a huge thing. And I'm going to show you about all the different wrongs there are in all the world. And this is what Satan does, is he continues to feed us wrong after wrong after wrong that we can point at other people, so that way we're accusing each other and accusing ourselves of things that aren't even wrong. And so we're going up before God, and what do we feel? We feel impure before God because we've done all these horrible, wrong things, and we live among horrible, wrong people, just like in Isaiah chapter 6. And God just comes and he says, no, I'm going to cleanse you of all that because I don't see you that way. That's Satan. That's the way Satan sees you. That's not the way I see you. I see you through the eyes of love. Satan is the one who sees you through the eye of accusation and judgment. And so Jesus says, if we are willing to give up on this and to live in a path of mercy, then there's a couple things that happen. First of all, life gets a lot simpler. Now, it's simple on one hand and not simple on the other, because it's simple because we can see things simpler, but everybody else is still living according to judgment. And it takes a long time to figure out what is actually worth judging and what is not worth judging. So, like, we go through culture, and in our culture, every lawn has to be mowed. If you don't mow your lawn, it is a sin and you will be fined. Okay, and you laugh, and it seems silly, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Charlie knows that one very well.
Yeah. You don't mow your lawn, you're going to get fined. You don't want to be fined, so that means you got to do the work. If you don't do the work, that's a sin, and you're going to be punished. In our society, we have to have electricity for our children who are under 18. If we don't, our children will be taken away from us. If we don't have running water, our children will be taken away from us.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Yeah, that's why they're always out there when there's homeless people, because they take their kids with them.
When we couldn't pay our water bill at one time, we received a polite phone call from the water company saying that if we didn't pay our water bill within X amount of time and get the water running again, then they would be calling child services to have them come and investigate us.
Wow.
And they're probably mandated, it's probably mandated.
When they sent us that notice, it didn't really sound so much it was mandated. They were just saying, this is what's going to happen.
Put pressure
And-
on.
Yeah, putting the pressure on. So pay the bill or we're taking your kids away. Yeah.
Putting the water pressure on.
Putting the water pressure
Whoa. Okay. Poverty is an evil that must be punished.
Right.
We all know that. Poverty is an evil that must be punished in our society. Some marriages are sinful.
You mean same-sex marriages? What do
Yeah.
you mean?
Some
Okay.
marriages are sinful, and others are not. And the church still does that. Does God ever say that some marriages are sinful and some not? Actually, technically, no. But that's what the church says. Some marriages are sinful and some aren't. If we don't hate the right people, then we're bad people.
Yeah.
If we don't hate the right people, then we're bad people. Depending on which side of the culture war we happen to be on.
Yeah.
If we and our friends are on one side of the culture war, then we have to hate the other side. At least some of the people on the other side. We have to hate them. If we don't hate them, we're in trouble. Gosh, the Bible says we shouldn't be hating people, but nevertheless, we know that it's going to be a sin if we don't hate them.
We're supposed to hate the devil, but it sounds like
It doesn't even.
they're
say
the ones
that.
that made us all the devil from the, or the serpent.
I
devil.
know, but the thing is that we're supposed to love everyone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it was already brought up about punishing people who use drugs. Seems to me like people who use drugs are already punishing themselves.
Yeah, totally.
And so we're going to be, and so We need to be punishing people who use drugs, punishing people who smoke marijuana. Thank God that that's not the case in this state. But the federal agents are still arresting people in this state for possession of marijuana.
There's a lot of people in jail right now because of marijuana
That's right,
all over the country.
all over the country.
They let other people out to put them in that are worse, doing
Yeah.
worse things than
Yeah.
the people that are smoking.
And then there's people who are punished because they were tempted to do something, not because they actually did it.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry, Carmen, but no, if you think about it, that's not the sin. Doing it is the sin.
Right.
Thinking about it is not the sin. And I know you mentioned about Jesus, but actually what he said was, if you look, if it's in your head and you look, the look or a look of covetousness or that lingering look, what Jesus is saying is even a very small action can be sin. So let's face it, if some guy just comes up to you and starts looking you up and down, you're ready to call that person a sinner. So is Jesus, he's with you.
And then adulterer, right? Isn't that what he was saying? At that
He
time?
says, yeah, because and so it's in your mind, but the fact is, it's not the fact that it's in your mind that's the problem. It's the
You're
fact
acting on it.
you're acting on it
May
and
not
you're
be a
doing it
big
in front of
action,
the person
but
who
you're acting
you're
on it.
thinking about. That sin is not what's going on in the mind. The sin is the box the objectification that he has put you in.
Mhm.
That's the sin. And that's actually what it says in the passage. It's the looking that's the sin, not what's going on in the mind. So the thing is that God isn't anti any person. God is not anti any person. He is for all people. God is against harming people, and he is against judging people. And he will stand against people if they harm them or if they judge them falsely. And because a lot of times if we judge somebody falsely, we're also punishing them. God is against punishing people who haven't done anything wrong. Very much he's against that, because that's what happened to his son. He got accused of things that weren't wrong.
And to a certain degree, he even tells us when people did do something wrong to let him take care of it
Right.
and not to take the punishment into our own hands.
And if we follow this path of mercy, and if we follow the kingdom and follow the path of love and depend on God and all that, then Jesus says that God will be there to take care of us, that he will feed us and make sure that things are taken care of, that if we seek first the kingdom of God, that all these things, food and clothing and shelter and all these other things, are going to be taken care of. In other words, God is creating a paradise for the people who are seeking to follow after him. He's creating an Eden-like atmosphere. It isn't exactly Eden-like because Jesus also said that we were going to be persecuted for it. So, Eden, if you like,
So there's
being in
that.
jail. Okay, but
Which it was kind of fun.
hey,
It wasn't there for very long, but
exactly. It's
Matt's like, no, Matt's been in jail. He knows.
She's over there going, fun.
You know what? You were never in jail with me. One of these times, let's go to jail together and let's see if it's better. I'll bet you it's better.
I'm sure it is.
I didn't eat anything in
Guarantee
jail.
it is.
Huh?
I didn't eat anything in jail. That would have been, I never ate that food. Actually, it was funny.
Oh.
Melanie, we got our food and I was like the meat, I was just gray, I just couldn't make myself. She goes,
Oh.
I'll trade you my celery for your sandwich. I'm like, yeah.
Two months for a cookie.
2 milks for a cookie. Yeah. I
Well,
was
see,
like,
we just got
okay.
peanut butter and jelly. We like peanut butter. I mean, how can you go wrong with peanut butter?
It's
Anyway,
true.
I was totally
Let's go
ready.
with the
I was totally ready to eat it, except that one of my friends, Chris, who was not with us, was in jail for a totally different reason. He's a huge guy. He's just, I'm starving. Are you gonna eat that food? Okay.
So you didn't eat either?
I didn't eat it either. So I don't know. Maybe it was good.
It wasn't
I
peanut
don't
butter and
know.
jelly, I'll tell you that.
Renamed him. No.
Anyway, all I'm saying is that, so I'm not saying that we can go back to Eden because we can't, but I'm saying that if we follow the path of God and do and follow the kingdom and say, I'm going to live according to love, no matter what else happens. Yes, we get the persecution, we may have some jail food, but God is going to take care of us. God is going to watch over us, and so He still promises that. He still promises the taking care of us, even with that, and so like Jesus said, God is going to watch over us just like He does with the birds, just like He does with the flowers, and that may mean we may eat like a bird and dress like a flower, but still we get to eat and we get to be dressed. Okay. The most important thing is just the thing that, if there's anything that you take away, is that judging people according to things that aren't really sin, that's the original sin. That's the most important thing. If there's one thing we can get from this, that's it. That's the. Any questions or anything? Any statements?
I've been thinking about, what is that passage about the knowledge of the pride of life, and what is that? You're talking
Yeah,
about?
it's in 1 John.
Yeah.
And I believe it's 1 John chapter 2. You want to look at it? Me to look it up real quick?
Sure, yeah.
I think I can get it.
So this is what I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking, okay, the devil's trying to make up new things to be considered, and like the whole idea of germs, for instance. Yes, they exist, but we found out about them and then we decided to judge people based on them, and that passage I've always thought was, at least this is what I've been taught, is that the increase of knowledge also is sinful in a way because of that. It's not there.
It's there. I'm trying to listen to you and trying to find it at the same time. But not all increase of knowledge is bad. The thing is that we can also increase in opportunities to show mercy to people. I had no idea how to use Facebook in order to show mercy to other people until like 4 or 5 years ago. That's totally new knowledge. And wow, I've really expanded on that knowledge. Totally not sinful because we're using it to do God's work.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can do the same thing. We can do that. We can get knowledge about all kinds of things in the world. The question is, how are we going to use it?
Yeah.
Are we going to use it for judgment, or are we going to use it for
Like
mercy?
healing people. Like
Yeah, I was going to say, the
germs,
knowledge
wash
of
your
germs
hands
saves
before you-
lives.
Yeah, before you do the surgery.
I think I found it. 1 John 2, do not love the world or the things in the world. The love of the Father is not in those who love the world. For all that is in the world, the desire of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, and pride and riches comes not from the Father, but from the world. Is that right?
No.
The
that
one?
wasn't
No.
the one.
Okay.
I don't know where it is. I'll find it.
Okay.
I'll comment
You will
on your
comment.
post.
Okay.
That's what it is.
But I like that one.
I like that one too. That's a good verse.
Interesting because those three things, those go directly back to how Eve saw the fruit.
Mhm.
The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. She saw that it was good. She saw that it looked good. Lust of the eyes. Anyway, yeah.
And that it was good for wisdom.
I thought it was good for wisdom, pride of life. Because I can get more knowledge. I can be more important.
Right, more ways to
More
judge
important,
people.
yeah.
I'm like,
And once again, just a thing, we've talked about this before, but when it talks about pride, pride doesn't mean just puffing yourself up. Oh, I'm such an important person right now. Pride means stepping on other people in order to get a higher position. Pride doesn't mean, oh, I'm proud of this. Oh, I did this and I'm so proud of myself. That kind of pride, if that's the case, that, oh, well, I did this and so I'm so proud of myself or whatever, then Jesus is a really sinful person, because Jesus had a lot of reason to be proud and he didn't have any problem telling people that he was the Son of God. Well, sometimes he did. But the real issue is, who are you going to step on in order to get ahead? And as opposed to, who will you let other people get ahead, even if they step on you? That's humility versus pride. Humility is letting other people get ahead. Pride is saying, no, I'm taking that position, no matter how it hurts somebody else. All right. Okay. will stop YouTube.